the Revised Penal Code, Crimes Against Property, Chapter 6, Swindling and Other Deceits. Article 315, Swindling or Estafa. Any person who shall defraud another by any of the means mentioned herein below shall be punished by, first, the penalty of prison correctional in its maximum period to prison mayor in its minimum period if the amount of the fraud is over 2,400,000 pesos but does not exceed 4,400,000 pesos. And if such amount exceeds the latter sum, the penalty provided in this paragraph shall be imposed in its maximum period, adding 1 year for each additional 2 million pesos. But the total penalty which may be imposed shall not exceed 20 years. In such cases, and in connection with the accessory penalties which may be imposed and for the purpose of the other provisions of this code, the penalty shall be termed prison mayor or reclusion temporal as the case may be. Second, the penalty of prison correctional in its minimum and medium periods if the amount of the fraud is over 1,200,000 pesos but does not exceed 2,400,000 pesos. Third, the penalty of arresto mayor in its maximum period to prison correctional in its minimum period if such amount is over 40,000 but does not exceed 1,200,000 pesos. Fourth, by arresto mayor in its medium and maximum period if such amount does not exceed 40,000 pesos, provided that in the 4 cases mentioned, the fraud be committed by any of the following means. 1. With altering the with unfaithfulness or abuse of confidence, namely, A. By altering the substance, quantity, or quality of anything of value which the offender shall deliver by virtue of an obligation to do so, even though such obligation be based on an immoral or illegal consideration. B. By misappropriating or converting to the prejudice of another, money, goods, or any other personal property received by the offender in trust or on commission or for administration or under any other obligation involving the duty to make delivery of or to return the same, even though such obligation be totally or partially guaranteed by a bond or by denying having received such money, goods, or other property. C. By taking undue advantage of the signature of the offended party in blank and by writing any document above such signature in blank to the prejudice of the offended party or any third person. Number 2. By means of any of the following false pretenses or fraudulent acts executed prior to or simultaneously with the commission of the fraud. A. By using fictitious name or falsely pretending to possess power, influence, qualifications, property, credit, agency, business or imaginary transactions, or by means of other similar deceits. B. By altering the quality, fineness, or weight of anything pertaining to his art or business. C. By pretending to have bribed any government employee without prejudice to the action for calumny which the offended party may deem proper to bring against the offender. In this case, the offender shall be punished by the maximum period of the penalty. Again, C. By pretending to have bribed any government employee without prejudice to the action for calumny which the offended party may deem proper to bring against the offender. In this case, the offender shall be punished by the maximum period of the penalty. D. By postdating a check or issuing a check in payment of an obligation when the offender had no funds in blank, or his funds deposited therein were not sufficient to cover the amount of the check. The failure of the drawer of the check to deposit the amount necessary to cover his check within 3 days from receipt of notice from the bank and or the payee or holder that said check has been dishonored for lack or insufficiency of funds shall be prima facie evidence of deceit, constituting false pretense or fraudulent act. Any person who shall defraud another by means of false pretenses or fraudulent acts as defined in paragraph 2 letter D hereof shall be punished by first, the penalty of reclusion temporal in its maximum period if the amount of fraud is over 400,000 pesos. Oh my God, no.
Where is it?
Where is it? This one.
This is rock.
This one, 1,000 pesos. But does not exceed 8,800,000 pesos. If the amount exceeds the latter, the penalty shall be reclusion perpetua. Second,
Where's the frog?
I don't know. You go over there. Second, the penalty of reclusion temporal in its minimum and medium periods. If the amount of the fraud is over 2,400,000 pesos but does not exceed 4,400,000 pesos. Third, the penalty of prison mayor in its maximum period if the amount of the fraud is 1,200,000 pesos but does not exceed 2,200,000 pesos. 4. The penalty of prison mayor in its medium period if such amount is over 40,000 pesos but does not exceed 1,200,000 pesos. 5th, the by prison mayor in its minimum period if such amount does not exceed 40,000 pesos. Just drink water, oh. Through any of the following fraudulent means. A. By inducing another by means of deceit to sign any document. B. By resorting to some fraudulent practice to ensure success in a gambling game. C. By removing, concealing, or destroying in whole or in part any court record, office files, document, or any other papers. Article 316. Other forms of swindling. At the penalty of arresto mayor in its minimum and medium periods, and a fine of not less than the value of the damage caused and not more than 3 times such value shall be imposed upon 1. Any person who, pretending to be the owner of any real property, shall convey, sell, encumber, or mortgage the same. 2. Any person who, knowing that real property is encumbered, shall dispose of the same, although such encumbrance be not recorded. 3. The owner of any personal property who shall wrongfully take it from its lawful possessor to the prejudice of the latter or any third person. 4. Any person who, to the prejudice of another, shall execute a fictitious contract. 5. Any person who shall accept any compensation given him under the belief that it was in payment of services rendered or labor performed by him, when in fact he did not actually perform such services or labor. 6. Any person who, while being a surety in a bond given in a criminal or civil action, without express authority from the court or before the cancellation of his bond, or before being relieved from the obligation contracted by him, shall sell, mortgage, or in any other manner encumber the real property or properties with which he guaranteed the fulfillment of such obligation. Article 317. Swindling a minor. Any person who, taking advantage of the inexperience or emotions or feelings of a minor to his detriment, shall induce him to assume any obligation or to give any release or execute a transfer of any property right in consideration of some loan of money, credit, or other personal property, whether the loan clearly appears in the document or is shown in any other form, shall suffer the penalty of arresto mayor and a fine of a sum ranging from 10 to 50% of the value of the obligation contracted by the minor. Article 318. Other deceits. The penalty of arresto mayor and a fine of not the less than the amount of the damage caused and not more than twice such amount shall be imposed upon any person who shall defraud or damage another by any other deceit not mentioned in the preceding article of this chapter. Any person who, for profit or gain, shall interpret dreams, make forecasts, tell fortunes, or take advantage of the credulity of the public or any other similar manner, shall suffer the penalty of arresto mayor or a fine not exceeding 40,000 pesos. Chapter 7. Chattel Mortgage. Article 319. Removal, sale, or pledge of mortgage property. The penalty of arresto mayor or a fine amounting to twice the value of the property shall be imposed upon 1. Any person who shall knowingly remove any personal property mortgage under the chattel mortgage law to any province or city other than the one in which it was located at the time of the execution of the mortgage, without the written consent of the mortgagee or his executors, administrators, or assigned. 2. Any mortgagor who shall sell or pledge personal property already pledged, or any part thereof, under the terms of the chattel mortgage law, without the consent of the mortgagee, written on the back of the mortgage and noted on the record hereof in the office of the Registry of Deeds of the province where such property is located.